Welcome to the Cyber Insights Podcast, brought to you by the ISACA Greater Washington, D.C. chapter. I'm your host, Jim Wiggins, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Mr. Altan Bulut. And our guest today is Mr. Jon Brandt from ISACA. We'll be talking with Jon about the topic, preparing professionals for AI Oversight. AAIA, AAISM, and AAIR. The AI Oversight trifecta. Let's get into the episode. Hi, everyone. This is Jim Wiggins, and welcome to another exciting episode of the ISACA-GWDC podcast, Cyber Insights, where we bring cybersecurity, risk management, privacy, governance, and even IT audit, and now artificial intelligence together to talk about the pressing issues that are facing our community today. In today's episode, we're joined by Mr. Jon Brandt, Director of Professional Practices and Innovation at ISACA. In ISACA's Content Development and Services organization, Jon helps lead thought leadership and guidance across audit, emerging technology, IT information security, privacy, risk, and GRC. Perfect guest for our community today. And this is really the exact area where AI oversight challenges are showing up first. So let's pull a little bit of context behind today's episode. AI, of course, is moving faster than most organizations can govern it. So today we're talking about the professionals who have to oversee it. That would be auditors, security leaders, and even risk teams. And why ISACA built 3 advanced credentials to meet that moment. The Advanced in AI Audit, AAIA, the Advanced in AI Security Management, AAISM, and the soon-to-be released Advanced in AI Risk, AAIR. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jim, for having me.
We're excited to have you. And of course, I'm joined today by my co-host, Mr. Altan Bulut. Altan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jim. Really excited about the conversation today.
Awesome. Hey, Jon, so let's talk a little bit about AI oversight for a moment, if we can. That seems to be the challenge that a lot of organizations are facing. Can we start off and maybe talk about when we use the term AI oversight, what exactly is being overseen? Are we talking about models? Are we talking about data, decisions? Give us a little bit of context, if you could.
That's the magic question. Ultimately, it's all of it, right? And from the beginning, I know we're going to dive into the programs a little further into this episode, but market drivers for this really was the variability in the marketplace, right? And there was a lot of proponents against AI is just another technology. You don't need separate certification programs. You don't need separate training programs. And there's some value to that in limited scope. And I think what we've seen since we began our market research and when we first began with AAIA, that those lines are there, but it's helping to kind of understand what's nuanced and what's the same as other tech. So ultimately, when we're talking AI oversight, this, for a lack of better words, is buzzword because everybody's talking AI governance, which isn't purely governance, right? Like they're talking something that is traditional governance and then something a little bit more tactical, a little bit more matrixed. It's as much visibility into it as you can, acknowledging that AI as a term is this umbrella that means a lot of different things, which is part of the challenge in it all.
So I think Altan's going to ask the next question. Go ahead, Altan.
So I can follow up on that, Jon. With all the things that are going on right now, like what do you think some of the top reasons for it to be on everybody's radar right now? This need to have like robust AI credentials overall. Like, what do you think? Is it the adoption of AI or any external pressures or anything that people can't keep up with?
So right off the bat, absolute speed of adoption should be at the forefront. And what's interesting in all this is that organizations, by and large, know how to deal with risk, but for whatever reason, the hype surrounding AI has it's changing risk appetite for segments of technology within organizations. There's this fear of missing out at your executive and board level. This belief that if you don't do it, you're going to somehow be left behind. And I think that what we're going to ultimately is going to get teased out during this whole conversation is that this is a scary proposition, right? And again, it depends on what we're talking about. Are we talking about actually creating your own models? Are we talking about managed services? Are we talking about features that are added to people's products? And all that compounds the risk part. But along with that was regulatory pressure, and that was a major market driver with AAIA was this realization in order for us to move forward, there has to be how do we provide assurance? And with traditional IT, a lot easier, right? Very binary, ones and zeros, yes, no, very everything's pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
But then we toss in this non-deterministic probabilistic technology, and it has really changed things. So regulatory was a huge pressure up front. Everybody saw what came out of the EU AI Act, and then all of a sudden, like we're starting to see the softening. So from my perspective, in largely what's driving a lot of this is you can't rely on compliance alone right now to save you because the tech providers, depending on what aspect or who you're dealing with, there's they're creating solutions to drive revenue right at the end of the day. And they may or may not be uh, able to be bound by pure compliance stuff. There's a ton of stuff with that, with algorithms at large. And how some of it kind of skirts the lines. And we've seen some cases regarding the EU AI Act where they had this law and it hasn't been softened yet, but still there were things that have happened in the world with this technology that people are like, well, how is that happening? And that kind of chips away at the compliance is the basement. It's the minimum bar. And is it sufficient for what we're doing? Not really. We really want to have a risk-based mindset, and it's beyond just the technology itself.
Mm. Yeah, makes sense. So, tying that to maybe the like oversight part with the credentialing and capability development, do you believe that the primary audience for these like certifications, the new certifications that ISACA has come up with, developed so in the recent uh, in last year and a little bit. So, do you think that's the primary audience, the oversight professionals, or do you see value for the like AI developers, quote unquote, like engineers, those kinds of folks to get a sense of like what that means to be like building guardrails in?
So I would say in a perfect world, absolutely, that those engineering efforts need a certain baseline in there. I think that
Mhm.
if we look at what's happened with just traditional code development and the DevOps versus DevSecOps arguments and whatnot, and where those right things are, as not to mention, I would say the lack of robust credentialing at the code, at the software developer level. That's why this exists. These three programs come alive. And in particular, what was interesting during the development of AAIA was the realization from a lot of our members that helped bring this together as to how auditors are actually shifting left earlier into the development cycle, almost in a preventative capability, like to what you're
Mm.
talking about, working a lot earlier. So you're not reviewing it at the end, you're iterating on it to actually produce a better product downstream.
Mm. Good. Lot of sense.
Awesome, awesome. So Alton's kind of driving us into our next topic, which is very relevant, and that's the whole skills gap, right? Where organizations are failing in practice. Maybe kind of build on top of that, Jon. Can we maybe get your insight into where do you think the biggest gaps are today with our community when it comes to AI oversight? Is it the audit? Is it security, or is it risk? I mean, is it, and can we simplify it like that? I guess is maybe a quick follow-on question for you.
So I think by virtue of what we're going to talk about, which is really the issue by and large, what's driving is the lack of visibility in some regards, right? It's you're buying services, you don't know how it works. It's the proverbial black box syndrome. It's the nth party problem that's getting worse. It's the number of mergers and acquisitions that is really kind of consolidating the threat, that threat surface. So audit, insurance, and I think security are co-parties as of the greatest importance right now. And if you think about it, they're opposing sides of the same coin right now. One is the implementation of controls, right? And the other one is the validation and checking of that. But all of that kind of feeds into the risk governance thing. So when you look at there's the three different credentials, it is quite possible that somebody's going to ultimately have three. It's possible that somebody only wants to have one, and others may just say, you know what, I don't need it. And that's a fair point as well. There are market opportunities, and I think that in this world of uncertainty that we're living in, it's about due diligence. It's due diligence of the practitioner, it's due diligence of the organization, because in the lack of robust regulatory mandates, then companies who are want to instill some level of responsibility and provide trust, to their brand, they're going to be looking to any kind of competitive edge. And ultimately, like, Jim, you and I have talked about this at length, right? Within the certification space, like, the IT related profession is arguably the most credentialed out there, right? We've got the most amount of options. At the same time, professional development is an individual responsibility. Like program owners, there's working groups that say, hey, this is what you need to continue to credit and everything. And we can actually point people towards the types or the topics that should be there. But ultimately, when that's an individual thing and not everybody's doing it the same. So offering a credential that's very specific in this function right now felt like the most appropriate thing to do at this moment in time.
Understood. Understood. I think Alton's going to pitch the next question to you, talking a little bit about roles. Alton, go ahead.
Yes, so if you were to imagine a perfect AI oversight group, either in a large organization or a regulatory body, what roles do you think would be essential there to make sure that all the crucial pieces are covered?
That's a great question. I am not currently I'm not of the belief that we're going to see a lot of dedicated roles emerge. I think early on there's a lot, and there are some people, that specialize in labor insights that are still kind of pitching this. I'm not one of those at this point. I think that we need to be focused on the skills, and the aggregate of needed skills is what drives any particular solution like a certification. So I would say if we look at how the IT auditor has evolved over time, it is the need to be extremely a lot more technical uh,
Hmm.
in their understanding. The same thing for cybersecurity. Like it depends. Cybersecurity is so broad, right? Like at the end of
Yeah.
the day, there's the non-technical aspect of it, if you will, which, people levitate towards GRC functions. And then you've got people that are doing extremely hands-on capabilities, but without actually working or understanding how it all works, I don't know how we get better. And almost, your question prompted this, this thought here is I'm almost seeing this akin to what's happened with the OT sector, right? We look at that like we got this convergence. We're seeing a lot of demand on traditional IT practitioners of any type. But at the reality was you had a lot of OT people that understood manufacturing systems and everything, and that we've kind of had to, to steer them a little bit towards understanding this realm. And that may just be what's needed here is if you are in fact an enterprise that's building models in-house or refining something off the shelf, you have to make sure that you've got the right companion pieces with that. And that's going to be somebody who understands the business, understands existing controls, understands the risk language of the company. It's the shared understanding that's largely lacking, and it's not a one size fits all right now.
So, hey, John, on that note, as you were talking about that, something that kind of percolated in my mind was, we've seen this kind of rodeo before, at least from my perspective. I feel like the cybersecurity workforce has kind of organically grown up, and we've had frameworks like the NICE framework that you and I've talked about for years about. Do you think AI is kind of another instance of that, where we're seeing the industry trying to figure out how they're going to get their hands around the different roles and the different knowledge and the different skills? Do you think there's some parallels there that we might be able to learn from the cyber world?
I think there are, and I would argue like where people want to talk about AI as being the most disruptive technology, and it has been of our modern, right, where we are. I think it's probably for those of us that are a little deep into our careers, it's probably going to be the last earth-changing thing we're going to see. And it's only be in the sense that when you and I started out in Altan, anybody who's in the security space, you're starting out and you're put in a box. Here's your silo. And over time, cybersecurity became a business enabler, right? So
Yep.
it's not just this bolt-on thing. And that's what we're really seeing, I think, right now is the fact of the matter is you have a lot of organizations that's providing a blind spot, and they're going to toss out terms like shadow AI at the user level, and that's all fine and dandy, and I acknowledge that that's legit. But what you're also having is you're having a lot of business units that are going to go procure solutions or going to have features added that may or may not be rise to the awareness of the people who need to understand what you're trying to do, helping you determine what the risk is, how does it affect the overall enterprise risk posture. And so in this regard, it's this really cross-functional view matrix, if you will, and you're almost distributing it across the organization. So if I see one trend and that AI will probably push us back to is when I first began in the government, it was you tried to do it centralized, and it's just such a monstrosity that they couldn't. So we were distributing it down with business ISSOs. We're seeing that kind of come back in your larger enterprises, financial services. You see some of that, and I think that's what's going to end up happening there. And whereas that can help at the individual business unit level, you still have to have a way to have alignment and aggregate it to that one entity or function that handles ERM at large.
Understood. Understood. Okay, cool. So we've talked about, the kind of the oversight. We've discussed a little bit about skills gap. Let's kind of now dig into the certifications a little bit more, right? So, this episode is actually called the IA Oversight Trifecta, right? So the idea is that we've got these three different credentials, AAIA, AAISM, and soon to be released AAIR. I guess you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but I wanted to dig a little bit deeper if we could, John, and try to understand, you know, what problem was ISACA really trying to solve by creating separate credentials as opposed to maybe just build one? I mean, you almost think like just from a functionality perspective, it would have frankly been easier if ISACA just to release one credential and say, all of these communities should basically use it. But can you spend just a minute and give our audience some context of, the rationale for the need for multi kind of role oriented credentials in this space?
Absolutely. It's a good question. And again, depending on where you are, and I know you're speaking to, your region's ISACA chapter. So they're familiar with us, but I also, many of them are probably like me and you, they have searched from other bodies.
Yep.
The reason was to advance those portfolios, and we talked a little bit about that early on. Like ProDev is kind of it is an individual function more than anything else. Also, with our general approach is with our certifications, they're tied to roles, so it wouldn't have made sense to do a one size fits all, because then you're really lacking the context and what it is. That particular holder should be focused on. To your point, there's commonality across all three, right? There is this trifecta exists for a reason, and depending on how you come into the ISACA ecosystem, there's a ton of our members that, by virtue of their career, will start as an auditor, then they move over and the risk is a good companion. Some of them jump into security or vice versa. It's this kind of choose your own adventure, if you will. But it allowed us to set a baseline. For AAIA, we expect you know how to audit, right? For security, we expect you to understand security program management. The other companion benefit to this was it gave us an opportunity to look broader and say, who else in this space has similar baselines? So by opening the aperture, right, and saying, for example, with AAIA, if you're a CPA or CIA that was doing technical auditing, come on over, right? So we weren't solving an ISACA problem per se. I would argue that we're solving an industry problem by acknowledging that there were other individuals out there beyond just us to kind of drive value.
Understood. Thanks. I think Alton's going to ask the next question. Next
Yes.
question. Alton?
So, following on that, by the way, I should probably mention that the what you mentioned about moving from audit to security resonates a lot with me. That's something that I did recently. So, in terms of responsibilities in the real world, like, do you see any like real lines to be possibly being drawn between these three major areas of operation, or just like responsibilities in an enterprise, like risk ownership, security implementation, and the assurance? How do you draw the line? Like, or like when we think about somebody potentially having all three credentials or some of those, and like, how does that translate into day-to-day
Yeah.
realities, like
No,
impacting?
it's a great question. Ultimately, right, I think the short answer is there is no clear lines in any of this. And this has been, for whatever reason, like within our profession, there's a lot of variability. And for those of us that have, Jim and I have a lot of experience here trying, within our respective orgs and within the C3, trying to, you know, align search to skills initiatives and how they
Mm,
map it. You're right. And so governments, companies, everybody kind of views this differently. You take any type of organization out there of similar size and structure, they're probably not going to approach it the same way. So I would say that it all starts from your enterprise risk management function, whoever has that, and it's diving down from there, because it should flow up. Like
mm,
ultimately it's these fractures and misalignments that are ultimately going to do more harm than good.
mm,
But in the risk world, like we talk about, like lines of defense, right? First line business leaders, right? You got first,
mm,
second, and third. I think that that's still a healthy way of looking at it with regards to what's internal, what's external validation, whether, with your auditors, or whether, to include any compliance regulations that might come down. It's just to provide, and this is my party line for any certification. When you're pursuing certifications, it should match where you are and what you're trying to do next. And there
Mm,
is this, there's this trend right now within the security space. And I don't know about you all, but when I look at it increasingly, and I recently went through a hiring cycle. I had a couple open positions, and I'm still of the mindset when somebody's grabbing a bunch of certs just for the sake of grabbing certs and it doesn't tie back to experience, I view that as a liability. And I think, and that's a view that's shared by a lot of hiring managers anymore. I'm not saying that that's the case here. I'd love for everybody to go get all the certs, but the reality is that you're the CEO of your own career. And the work that ISACA collectively is doing in conjunction with all you chapters, that's what we want to drive. Like, help us help you attain your career aspirations, right? And it isn't go collect all these things at first. It's the how do we put you on a guide you, come along, partner with you to achieve what it is that you want to do, but to ultimately make the organization and I would argue that the society at large safer and, for us to operate because this interconnected world we in is extremely fragile. You all up there in the greater Washington area know that. You saw that a big storm last weekend. We're seeing it down at, the southern coast here where ice storm. It was the greatest continuity exercise that's played out that was unplanned, right? Like it has shuttered the world.
that's interesting. So I just wanted to like double click on that a little bit in terms of the certifications versus day-to-day job responsibilities. Like maybe like my perspective, like personally, is slightly different than that. I personally see certifications as a structured way of learning a subject matter or domain in a more like focused way than it otherwise would be possible because it gives you something to aim for in a relatively time bound in a defined frame. And then that ties usually to a body of knowledge that is well formed or at least overseen, structured by an organization, usually. And there's this idea of a general understanding of a lot of concepts feeding into one another to enable better understanding of each individual domain with the broader view in mind, being able to zoom in and out. Not necessarily to do all of those things, but having a clearer understanding, I see being able to help, like with the idea of creativity, for example, being able to connect things, for example. It's not like you're creating something out of thin air, right? You know a bunch of things, and then whilst when you're doing something totally like not cognitively challenging, let's say, like mundane, something pops up because of all that background knowledge somehow just connected. That gives you some insights that may not have been accessible to you had you not known some of those like seemingly unneeded things, like not necessary like deep knowledge, but it could help. And there's also this like recent uh developmental research. I don't know uh if that's too relevant to the conversation right now, but just the idea that world's top performers tend to be the ones that start out as generalists, the people who tried out a lot of different things and then specialized later on, rather than learning to golf at 2 years old and then just like doing that for their whole lives. So I wonder what you think about that perspective. Like it's not necessarily some people, I would consider myself in that camp too. Like when we do a certification, not necessarily to do a job on that domain, but having a deeper understanding usually informs judgment, I feel like in
No,
some
those
sense.
are great points, Alton. I would say that the line though becomes, do you have the experience for the credential that you're taking, right? And so to your point, like I would argue with a lot. I said I would agree with a lot of the sentiments that you just shared. Like I've been pretty purposeful as as I've, moved along my career. Um, Definitely agree with the sentiment, with regarding the learning sciences and the variability and whatnot. Um, Ultimately, it still comes down to like somebody who like, and we go. I know we're focused on the three advanced certifications,
Hmm.
but if you look at what's kind of happened in the marketplace with other credentials and there's different models of approaching it. Are you allowed to take the test before you have the experience? Or can you take the test first, then build the experience? I don't know that there's any one right way where we live as a credentialed body. And I know that this is, I've had these types of conversations with the major other major bodies is that there's you'll still have sometimes people fall through, and that's not the intent here. These three advanced certs that we're talking about, right? We set the baseline. This is what you have to have. I agree with you. There is a learning opportunity that accompanies it and everything. But when you go to take the test, though, like if you just want the learning and then you want to actually go take the test, for this purposes, right? These three programs were you had to be successful. We were, I think the specific language is something about uh, having experience securing AI and or evaluating those solutions, right? It's pivot because they're experiential tests. So you
Hmm.
can learn and fill in the gaps. I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying there. But motives vary. And I think that's what I was trying to tease out early on is that not everybody looks at it through the lens that some of us are. Like we're a little bit more purposeful. And you said that we're time bound. And I absolutely love that because that's how you know somebody's kind of has some structure around their life and what they're trying to
Hmm.
accomplish. I've never been one. If I set out to do a program, it's like I want to be done in 90 days, like tops, right? Like some, where life might get in the way. But anyway, I hope that kind of addressed some of what the
Yeah,
counterpoint that you made, which I think is
absolutely,
valid.
totally.
Like, yeah, no,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think we agree overall. Like
Yeah.
there should be some like reasonable like boundary, like with certain aim, like what you're trying to do with your studies and efforts, etc.
I'd also
So
add, I want to jump in real quick too. And I'd also add, like, I think we're at this time. There's a lot of, with the amount of work that we do, there's a lot of advocacy calls that I get pulled into, and different how countries are trying to tackle their skills problem or whatnot. Like they are looking at credentials, and people have talked. There's some countries that have talked about licensure. I personally, I don't see how licensure ever really is going to come about unless they rely heavily on an industry credential. Like we've talked this whole conversation. There's just so much variability. There's not one common body of knowledge that traverses the globe, right? That's why a
yeah,
cyber analyst specified by the EU those knowledge and skills are going to look a little bit different than what DoD did versus NICE did versus Singapore.
Yep, yep. All right, awesome conversation, gentlemen. Let's dig a little bit deeper though. We want to talk about the trifecta. I want to spend some time talking about each of the credentials so that our audience can gain a little bit deeper understanding of what these credentials are and maybe what their value is. Can we start with AIA, John? I want to talk to you a little bit about, you know, um, just full disclosure. I've got the AI credential. I saw a lot of value in it early on, picked it up, but I want to get your take on this, right? So, I know that this credential allows individuals to audit complex systems and mitigate AI related risks. I wonder if you could give our audience some perspective on how that might fundamentally different what kind of difference exists between auditing an AI system and versus auditing traditional IT? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think right off bat, we touched on it a little earlier. It's going to be availability of evidence, right? When we start talking about models and algorithms, and it's complex math, and um, truly, there's a lot of reports out there that people don't really understand it. They even did like it takes on a life of its own. So that variability is the underpinning thing of what's different here. Um, I'd say, a lot in our conversation when we're talking AI, the opening question always needs to be, what business problem are you trying to solve? And it's that alignment right there at the beginning. If you're just using automation for the sake of automation, um, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me as an individual if I was running a, multi-million dollar company. But, and again, it comes back to this whole thing regarding AI. Like there's been aspects of AI that are not novel. It's just been in the last couple of years that generative just took us down a direction and everybody's like, it's this new crazy thing. No, listen, we've had ML, we've had algorithms in play, financial services, credit monitoring, fraud detection, social media. Like it's been in our face for a long time. It's the fact that now it's hitting businesses. Now it's on, more, it's, hitting more people. So I think that lack of evidence is really, or the lack of certainty around that. What can you even get? Like, so there's model cards. Okay, that's great. AI, bill of material, are they there? Like, we're seeing a lot of buzz, right? A lot of vendors are saying, hey, we can give you these insights. I'm always kind of leery, like when the tech provider's providing a capability to audit their own stuff, like it just kind of goes against the whole security mindset, right? I'd much rather have some independence. It's like way back in the day of Microsoft. Like we didn't go to Microsoft to secure Microsoft. We went to go somebody else. Um, so that's I think that's the primary driver right now. Like it's what can you see? What do you know? Do all of the are the lines are the lines connecting within the organization, the use case? How are they doing continuous monitoring? Do they have programs around it? Because this is something where it kind of blends into a traditional audit program. Like, how are you monitoring this thing? Like, yes, it's the underlying tech and the math and what's driving decision making. That's some of the unknown right now, but what's that level of assurance? Like, what's your confidence level within the organization that it's working the way you intended to? And if it goes off the rails, how do you deal with that?
Great answer. Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Alton's going to ask the next question. Alton?
Yes, so following on the like some of the biggest priorities that organizations must keep in mind, like what would you expect competent AI auditors to look at first in terms of AI control domains, areas to evaluate and provide assurance on?
Everything surrounding the software. Admittedly, like as a profession,
Mm,
like the AI is code, right? Code, but it from my perspective, it's still one of the challenging areas. So, that whole software development domain, our inability, to secure APIs, and now we're looking at you're looking at your model control, your MCP servers, and that architecture there, that interoperability, code repositories, how you're using it. Like that would be the one focus that I would be looking
mm,
heavily at.
mm,
Um, because it's the stuff that we weren't getting right to begin with. Like, and then obviously the human component of it is still there. So how many, I don't know how many enterprises are going to be creating their own models and everything like that. I think that those, you're going to have some pockets that are really bleeding edge of the industry. The primary use case I don't see is going to be that you're going to be using other people's services. I think it's, and when you have industry mechanisms today like SOC 2 that took a black eye not too long ago, right? I, if I recall correctly, it was kind of almost a pay to play scheme, right?
mm,
How does that play in here? Like we all just need to be there's no such thing as perfect in our space. It's progress, admittedly. Like there was already no absolutes within the traditional IT space, and then you take a technology that by its sheer nature is not, it's non-deterministic, it heightens that the criticality for us to learn as much as we can and make the best risk-related decisions based on the information available at that moment in time, knowing that you have to continuously monitor it, almost real time.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Hey, Jon, since we're talking about the audit role right now, I was curious maybe if you knew what kind of audit evidence do you think organizations are not having ready when it comes to the AI landscape? Has that been kind of flushed out in any of the research that you guys have done relative to organizations and their adoption of artificial intelligence?
A lot of it's still anecdotal, right? Like we'll go to, I've been at some conference sessions. The InfoSec North America one was pretty enlightening, some sessions down there, and there's some organizations like there's a whole lot of this is what you should be getting, but not a lot of confidence that that's what they're going to get. And I boil this back to the fact that we're in a very the service oriented world, like we're relying on others to do aspects of our stuff, right? You're going to a vendor to provide something, MSP, it doesn't matter. Somebody's providing you something. And the reality, and this is my cynical nature, they're going to sell you what's easiest for them right now. It's not necessarily what you need. So, how willing do we think that they're going to really be to provide you all of the information that may even be potentially that provides it as a scarier proposition than it is? Right. Like at the end of the day, if you've read any of the model cards that are out there as to like, holy cow, first of all, like they're not succinct documents, the couple that I saw. And when I'm reading, I'm like, boy, I don't know why anybody would want to go pursue this. Like that's, and that's just the lay perspective on this. And then we did have like one of our board members did a speaking session in Europe, and I do know like within the security realm, they've had better success. They've had some good successes in their security operations realm, but it was basically segmenting the data way down, making it a more controlled use case, if you will, data set. And then that begs the question, then you're losing the scalability of it all. And I think, as we get down, we start talking about the multitude of risks that enterprises should be considering. I don't know that we're ever going to get to the ROI that some believe that they could get.
Understood. Understood. Hey, gentlemen, just in the interest of time, why don't we move to the next area? Because I want to be sensitive to Jon's time. The next one we wanted to talk to you about, Jon, is the AAISM, right? That's the security management focus credential. I know that it, is kind of focused on helping individuals and organizations identify, assess, and mitigate IA related risks. What do you think that, based on the credential and your understanding, what are the top AI security challenges that security managers are facing right now? And maybe speak to how the credential helps in that particular space.
Um, I think I'd say, one of the major drivers is the lack of certain, well, it comes back to a common language. And I'm going to open with, I hope I don't butcher her name, DeSesde Susanna Cox. She's, right, she runs she's all over LinkedIn. She's a prominent AI researcher, red teamer. And I found like, it really interesting. And these are the voices we should be elevating in the profession. The folks that aren't just hinged on the governance and a policy or this is what the terms and conditions. No, it's like what is the problem? Like how does it work? And to kind of make sense and if you will counter what the vendor what the third party landscape is saying, right? And when you have a prominent AI red teamer who will come out and say, listen, I wouldn't be using agents. You can't secure agentic architecture. That would scare the crap out of me, right? Like I just like in that regard, like all of a sudden, like you're increasing your risk exposure. It's not to diminish the other parts of but you're getting mixed messages. And I think we just live in an era right now where there was a lot of hype regarding, how AI was going to evolve and mature to a point, and it looks like we're hitting that wall. And so from a security perspective, first and foremost is understanding what you have. That lack of visibility is still a problem today. It was a problem before we introduced AI, right? Like, and we go back to something as basic as asset management. How many organizations weren't doing that well? It's still an insider threat. Well, there's a primary driver for breach reporting. Then now all of a sudden we're relying on more partners. You have external people with access to systems, service accounts, and whatnot. That there is a huge, it should be a big area of focus. But then there's security teams that have worked with IT ops cells. They have this well-oiled machine. You want to go procure this thing. We're going to do contract reviews. We're going to do security reviews, impact privacy assessments. Great. We get you validated. We bring you on board. We onboard you. Everything's smooth. And then a week later, they release a feature. And it totally throws out all of the work that's been done up to that date. I don't envy the work of a lot of these security teams that are already significantly overworked right now and not resourced enough. So it's this, there, it is highly reactive, right, at the end of the day.
Understood. Understood. I think Alton's going to pitch the next question to you.
Yeah,
Alton?
yeah. I mean, again, like it makes sense that you don't envy a lot of security teams. So I just wanted to, on that note, like when we think about AI being like a fundamental, like, in a lot of ways, a different phenomena, which is like non-deterministic, different than traditional software. Like in normal software that you can execute the same action a million times, you would get the same result, pretty much. But with
Mhm.
AI, there can be like a 24-hour difference in the same activity. You might get a lot of divergence. So that's just for the performance and outcome, even from the business perspective. Like, so how do you see security teams adapting and shifting their mindset in terms of providing adequate and reasonable security around AI systems and potentially even relying on them to provide security services to a certain extent?
This is a great question. And I think it's one of the prominent things that is, I think that a lot of people are looking at right now. So, I'd say depending on you're going to spend again, if you're a model provider, model developer, I think then ultimately you probably have a lot of AI developers, engineers involved. Then it's like, do you have dedicated security people supporting that? I don't know. But to your point, like this notion of I boil it back to what does incident response look like with regards to AI, specifically with model operations. And that's the thing that a lot of people are trying to wrap their arms around right now. Um, I am aware that there's some products that are emerging that are providing visibility to network wire based as onto like what people are doing on your network. Are they going to be, 100% solutions? Probably not. Do they point you in the right direction? Sure. I think that we're going to see some capabilities like that. But then the challenge becomes like, I'm not a developer by trade, but I know just enough to be dangerous that when so many different variants of models are evolving, and the number of models that are out there is just enormous. We hyper focus on the big ones, but how do you build a product that would basically address all of that and it be cost effective to an organization? I really don't know. But to put a bow on this, I think it's like constant vigilance and it's this inquisitive nature. I think security people have to be empowered, and I believe in a lot of ways they are, to ask the hard questions, right? And it's to keep kind of peeling back into this continuous review cycle, which is why like risk assessments to do them in any kind of fixed interval is really invalid anymore in the environment that we're looking at. You almost have to do
Yeah.
this, it's continuous.
Yeah.
Um,
So maybe I was thinking, do you think the framing of AI enabled tools is like almost like humans, like you onboard somebody on your team and you're figuring out how they're going to perform. And there are certain risks, like we talk about, like insider risks and people making mistakes. Do you think that AI risks and like potential outcomes, like either good or bad, gonna resemble like what organisms can provide in a way? Like people are not deterministic, right? You onboard a cybersecurity expert, 99% of the time they will be helpful, but sometimes not. But do you think it's kind of similar? Maybe like we have this user and entity behavior analytics in terms of trying to determine like what is anomalous behavior in terms of actual users, like when somebody does something potentially wrong. Do
That's
you
a
think that's similar?
great, that's probably one of the most insightful questions somebody has posed. Like, as you're talking through it, I'm like, holy cow! Like, no, that makes a lot of sense to me because as humans, we can be unpredictable. I think the variability is a lot worse with this technology, but maybe the right answer is like when we're trying to figure out where academia falls in all of this, like the need for it's greater attention to the performance monitoring aspect of it. I'd agree with you. Like, what is that right answer? What, for an organization, when you have this drive from the top and this fear of missing out, we have to move fast. Our goal is to help them move in a way that they're comfortable with the risk. And so trying to equip our members to empower faster decision making, better inputs, right? To consider recognizing that those things could change on a moment. R&D, like when through some of the reports that we were doing over the last couple of years, like obviously, I think there was we saw a mass jump like when Gen AI hit this GPT hit, exploded the airwaves, and then it was like small blip was doing R&D, and then all of a sudden, like there was a bigger group, and then there was this like kind of push to the marketplace. So, um, I'd say anything that we can do, and then an organization can do to basically slow the cycle, make it a little bit more controlled,
Hmm.
would probably the most beneficial thing. But again, like there's no one size fits all to any of this. Like,
Yeah.
what's your staffing? Are you building something from the ground up? I say if you're building something from the ground up, you probably have the resources to build that proverbial, bench that you were talking about, or seek the right folks. And then you're probably a little bit more committed to long-term success. If you're looking to buy something off the shelf, you're looking for the bang for the buck without a long-term commitment. Um, and then you're kind of bootstrapping in it at that point.
Okay, so we've talked about the AAIA and the AAISM, and I think that the dialogue's been really powerful because we've been able to talk about some of the key issues that these certifications delve into, at least in terms of the problem space. I do want to spend a few minutes talking about AAIR because that's the upcoming certification that's currently in beta today. So it's not necessarily available, but it will be available in the coming months. I wondered if you could help us just talk a little bit about from a risk perspective, and we've kind of alluded to this already, but maybe put a bow tie on it if you want, Jon, and kind of bring together if you think some of the things we've talked about already address this question. But this credential is really designed for risk managers, risk professionals, people that are involved with emerging AI challenges. Based on your research, when you guys were building this credential, what were the AI risks that you think are kind of maybe underestimated right now? Is it probabilistic output? Is it the human in the loop? Is it or the lack of the human in the loop?
I'm glad you asked this question because I have a running list here, right? And again, in
That's
our
great.
in our quest to actually drive value, provide, practitioner aids and whatnot. Like, so there's something, we've been working on, called an AI impact assessment. So you guys are learning about it first. I expect it to be out, Lord willing, here by the end of this first quarter. But so I'm going to run from the top here. Privacy, accountability, fairness and discrimination, transparency, consent, obviously cybersecurity related stuff, right? Sustainability, health and safety, human in the loop, human on the wire, auditability, explainability, interpretability, future of employment, hidden costs, and anthropomorphism. There's a whole lot to unpack there. I think the whole purpose of me running through that list right now is to say it's not just protecting APIs. It's not just trying to keep bad actors at bay. It's not just protecting your training sets. When an organization is choosing to make an AI investment and solution somehow, there's a lot more to it. And if there's any credential that drives us closer from taking IT risk and bringing it more into the operational realm towards ERM at large, it's going to be this one here. It's funny, right? The ESG was all the craze, and then all of a sudden AI hit the streets and then it died. Like nobody's talking about that at large, right? Because data centers need to pop up. You look at the cost, these estimates of what it costs power and cooling to run simple queries. Like, I'm pretty amazed at how vast it all is. So organizations, and they have to look broader. It's just behind the tech. It is environmental sustainability, and we'll have to fill that one in there.
Okay, no
Leave it
worries.
in
I
to
just
me. But
curious.
yeah, like surrounding sustainability at large. And
Is that because the data centers are driving huge adoptions with AI, and so that whole idea is it was kind of thrown out the window? Is that what you're saying?
absolutely, all of a
Oh,
sudden,
got it.
like we just pushed it to the wayside. And when you look here in the United States, there are reports of this. And if you're, even as an individual, I think that we hyper focus on the practitioners and the day to day within their day jobs, but all of us live in communities. They live in, we live in city states, municipalities. These decisions are largely shaping the world around us. Southern part of the US, I think it was outside of Atlanta, if I recall correctly, rural water supplies drying up based on demand that's been coming from some of this stuff. So what are those calculations? How are we, do we care about that anymore? Like, I think these are they're high stakes questions on, and they arguably are going to be shaped by where you are. When I started kind of thinking a little bit more deeper about the workforce, Jim, I came across a report from PwC, their four worlds of work. And depending on the type of organization and how you align, and I would encourage anybody to go look at that report because it puts things in, I think it was red, green, yellow, and blue. And it ranges everything from more social to pure capitalism, right? And then in between that's going to shape some of what's happening right now, and we need to be looking bigger picture. Everybody's looking like we're looking short-term benefits without considering long-term impacts. And I don't know that there's any right or wrong solution, but what I do know is there's a lot of reports out there that are talking specifically about the hype, the lack of ROI. So, and we should be concerned at the major infrastructure investments that are being made when it feels like there's a level of uncertainty with some of this.
Understood. I think Alden's going to ask the next question. Alden.
Sure.
Yeah, so specifically about the AAIR right now, like as it's been developed in beta, like what are some of the top points that you've gathered, like learned in the process in terms of what organizations are struggling with when they wrap their minds around AI risk management overall?
So I'm going to earmark this by saying we're still in beta. So, there's still some adjustments being made.
Hmm.
So I'm going to speak to like some major drivers, right? Major reporting organizations aren't ready right now. And this isn't ISACA saying it. This is, the world. Harvard Business Review reports, MIT reports, um, global AI trust maturity surveys. It's risk decision making, and we've been kind of pushing for this, I think, as practitioners for a long time. You know, by and large, people are still doing annual risk assessments. I think we'd all agree on this call and your listeners to say that's not adequate with what we're dealing with. Even 6 months really isn't. So how do we kind of move from this static view to more of a dynamic using, we still have the same amount of people. We don't have any more people to do the work. We're highly reliant upon technology to do some of this for us, to which there are some GRC solutions that are showing promise. But even then, you can't solely rely on them, right? And I think for the same things that we were talking about, hey, how do you really trust your AI? What evidence do you need to look at? Those are the same questions you're applying to any solution for anybody that shows up in your doorstep says, hey, we can help with your AI risk problem. I think that the vendor selection and the product review cycles are going to get even more complicated, a little bit more require more effort to make sure that you're making the right decisions there. But similarly that we did with the other certs too, like again, expanding this beyond just the ISACA universe. Jim, you talked about, there's a lot of risk-related practitioners out there. The product team, there was a lot of work that went into reviewing equivalencies. How do we kind of expand that? And it isn't this, I like this from the sense of the ISACA community is really good at business alignment. It's one of the things that I've learned so much in working with members over 12 and a half years. Like for somebody that was working in the government sector to come over. And when you start looking at things, dollars and cents and, revenue and efficiency and all those different things, that's where you really truly understand the tug of war that's happening on a day-to-day basis to help help business leaders make informed risk-related decisions to be successful.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So we're short on time. We've got just a few minutes left, John, but I did want to ask um, a couple of quick follow-on questions. We wanted to ask, because our audience is going to say, hey, this is a great discussion. I've learned about, some of the credentialings in this space and some of the challenges that they're attempting to solve. Can you talk for a moment about maybe two factors? One is, what are the prerequisites that are required for the three credentials? And then if somebody wanted to get more than one, is there a certain kind of recommended pathway that you might propose, or is it just dependent upon their own individual objectives?
Okay, great question. So prerequisites for AAISM, you need to have a CISM or a CISSP. For AAIA, you need to have our CISA, CIA, or CPA with like technical auditing capabilities. Risk is a little bit broader, right? We open it up to CISA, CISM, CRISC, CGUITE, CDIPSI, basically all of our core certs. CRMP, CRMA, CGRC, CISSP, CERP, CRCM, and PMI's RMP certification. So that's a pretty wide swath there. As to which one you should probably do first, personally, and this kind of goes back to the conversation Altan and I had, I'd probably pick the one that's more closely aligned with what it is you're doing today. I think Alton added some really good value as to, and especially if you have multiple certifications with us or qualifying certifications, there obviously is no harm in doing more. ISACA was really good in the sense of like, my understanding is there's a one size fits all renewal regardless of the number of advanced certs that you have from a renewal fee. The CPE requirements are still, aligned to the ECO. Uh, that's where I would personally go. But we're seeing especially between security and audit right now. I see a lot of cross-pollination in there. Um, but yeah, I'd go back to what it is that you're starting with. Obviously, like if you're not if you're not leading security functions, security manager, CISO type thing, um, probably doesn't make sense to start with AAISM. You know, like if that's you're not actively there. So that would be as a starting point. But again, like I think to Alton's point, like there's value. Obviously, there's key concepts, there's points that are relevant across all three. It's the context, it's the perspective, it's the application that's going to vary, um, which does make them unique in that sense.
Awesome. Awesome. I think Alton has one final follow-on question for you.
Yeah, so I'm trying to wrap all of these up into if you were to leave the audience with a single precept or principle for AI governance and oversight, at least for the next year, because everything is moving at light speed. So would you have something that is like an overall like a truth statement that everybody should keep in mind as a principle going forward to be prepared and remain competent?
I think it would be, I love this question. Question everything. I think that we live in an era right now, and I'm gonna earmark this real quick. I know we're at time, but we now live in an era where the amount of synthetic media that's out there is at astronomical levels. Critical thinking is arguably at an all-time low, and and organizations sometimes who mean well are trying to push AI usage on people in such a ways that it might have unintended benefits, right? We talk about this concept of AI slop. There's already research coming out about like just technology in general has really eroded human capability. And when you talk about like we are the most complex organism out there, like in from a human sciences perspective. But I'd say it, don't get stuck in the, well, we've always done it this way. I think, you know, and that would be the benefit right now is do your own research, validate it, try to triangulate based on, and this is whether you're an individual or working in your enterprise. Now more than ever, like, boy, this technology at large has just been hijacked by bad actors of all types, shapes. Um, and I fear that we're going to lose ourselves through it. This is a pretty tumultuous time just to be within the profession. It was interesting. One final point I'll make is that I think that we finally hit the one technology that, and for all those risks that I listed earlier, if you're an organization and you're looking to provide a service, a widget, chatbot, AI enabled feature of any kind, I would be paying very close attention to what's happening outside because I think that people's views on AI are being shaped outside of the traditional e-commerce landscape. And when you look at, you know, we were tired of not being able to reach humans and stuff like that. I think it's those types of things in this growing distrust for what's real from not and having an ability to get in touch with actual human decision makers that's going to make or break the success for a lot of initiatives moving forward.
Awesome. Awesome. Hey, Jon, we are at time. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your thoughts and experience with our audience. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for all the members within your chapter. You guys are at the epicenter, a major epicenter here in the nation. My old stomping grounds. I absolutely was glad to be able to come on here and share some behind the scenes stuff and maybe some new information.
It's been great. Thanks again, Jon.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, that concludes our latest episode of the Cyber Insights podcast. This is, of course, being brought to you by the ISACA Greater Washington, D.C. chapter. If you want to check out information about our chapter, feel free to visit the chapter's website at www.isaca-gwdc.org. You can listen to prior episodes of the podcast. You can learn about upcoming conferences, upcoming training events, and figure out useful ways to get involved. This is Jim Wiggins again. Great having you with us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next broadcast. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.